Welcome, everyone. My name is Beatrice Pulliam, and I'm president of the Rhode Island Library Association. And I want to thank you for joining us today to help us celebrate Library Advocacy Day here at the State House Library, and also helping us to celebrate the freedom to read. There are 6 bills making their way through the legislature. I was going to see, can I move this? Yes, I can. This session, which really feels a bit like a record. Thank you all for your support. Many of the bills have had at least a House or Senate committee hearing already, and we're still waiting to hear the fate of the proposed resolution to fully fund libraries. As you may have heard, the current proposal is a decrease to what is outlined in the Rhode Island general laws. So we're really hoping that the governor will see to resume the 25% of full funding to libraries. I would like to thank our members at large for putting on this great event today. Also, Legislative Action Committee, and of course, the State House Library for hosting this event. We have a lot of people to thank, so bear with me before we get started. I want to thank the ACLU, the Library Board of Rhode Island, the Rhode Island State Council of Churches, who's a co-sponsor of this event, the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, the Rhode Island Coalition for Separation of Church and State, NAGE, National Association for Government Employees. Thank you, John, for your help with all of our legislation. The Rhode Island chapter of the National Organization for Women, the Association of American Publishers, the Women Project, Authors Against Book Bans, the National Education Association, the University of Rhode Island, American Association of University Professors, and the American Federation of Teachers. There have been a lot of people working really hard to make these connections with all of these organizations, so I want to thank them for that. And last but not least, I'd like to give a couple of shout outs to Representative Bennett, Representative Potter, Representative Ewer, and Representative Carson. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the program. Our invited speakers will speak for a couple of minutes each, and I ask you to hold your questions till the end. We'll have a Q&A at the end. And today we're pleased to have legislators join us to introduce a few of the 6 bills that I mentioned earlier. Our first speaker is Senator Mark McKinney, and he represents Warwick in the District 30, and he's going to introduce Senate Bill 2281 and 2429, which are the Freedom to Read Bill and the Affirmative Defense Bill. Thank you, Senator McKinney.
Thank you, Beatrice. Could we have a better place to hold this than this? I'll also note that I've had some association with libraries. My friends from, I still think of it as PCL here, but I chaired the State Library Board for 10 years and then was asked to be the governor's designee on the PPL board. Fought any number of battles there to try and keep all the libraries open in the neighborhoods. When that didn't happen and PCL was formed, I was asked to serve on their board as governor's designee, and I couldn't have been happier going over there. So I've had a little acquaintance with some of this. Let me talk about the things I was asked to talk about today, the 2 bills that we have in the Senate that have companion bills in the House. Freedom to Read Act declares emphatically that it's the policy of Rhode Island to encourage and protect freedom of public libraries to curate their collections without limitations. It protects libraries from efforts to ban, to remove, to censor, to restrict access to materials. It says materials should not be removed from public libraries due to partisan or doctrinal disapproval. And in that way, it upholds the notion that free public libraries are crucial to the enlightenment of the citizenry and to the advancement of democracy. The second act is the Library Shield Act. And right now, Rhode Island has no explicit protection in its laws for library workers, educators, and museum workers with respect to alleged obscenity. This law will protect them. 44 states, and that includes all of New England, have laws on the books to protect folks from overzealous prosecutors or small minorities who might find a book offensive and decide to sue or seek to have criminal charges prosecuted. Who and what is usually targeted? Well, I think we all know that. It's no surprise. Librarians and educators teaching on or having books on the usual subjects: health, sexuality, orientation, race. Efforts to criminalize what are otherwise normal educational and library practices have included introduction of legislation as well as criminal complaints brought to law enforcement. We are a diverse community and decide what they wish to take out of a library or what they wish for their kids to take out, but they can't decide for other people. The fact is, and unfortunately, librarians are forced to fight lawsuits and criminal charges, and frequently for books that are classics. Folks don't realize that librarians are professionals who carefully consider what goes on their shelves. Folks who complain and who think books aren't scrutinized by librarians are simply wrong. They are. And in Rhode Island, there's a process for review of any book that someone complains about as being inappropriate. It's a long-time process. It's been in place for many years. So the fact is, there's no reason for any kind of a lawsuit unless that lawsuit is being used as a weapon or being used for publicity. These folks, our librarians, are on the front lines defending intellectual freedom. And this law, if passed, would not keep them from being sued, but it would certainly give them greater protection than they presently have. Think about it. Freedom to read. What could be more basic? And in these times, what could be more necessary? We should pass these bills this year. As the Senate bill was headed for committee hearing this week, I took the time to watch the recent House hearings. I'm now retired from the day job, so I can do things like that. One rep was contending that since taxpayers are funding libraries, if a librarian is putting inappropriate books on the shelf, taxpayers should have a say. Well, the fact of the matter is, taxpayers do have a say, just like anyone has a say. Anyone has the right to complain about a book. And that process then takes place. Library staff consider it. If the person isn't happy with the decision that they make, then it can usually be appealed to the board, the local library board. Interestingly enough, a complainant does have to detail exactly what it is that they find offensive. That means that they really ought to have read the book before making the complaint. I don't know whether on the complaints there's a requirement that they attest to that, but if not, I'd suggest that there should be. But frequently, that's not what we're seeing. It's not just some local citizen who's got a legitimate concern, serious concern about a particular book. It's someone who's got an agenda. And often it's someone doing the bidding of a national organization that has an agenda itself and often wants to ban 50 books that are on a list. So something to keep in mind, particularly with respect to that concern about the taxpayer. Sure, the taxpayers should have a say. That's true, and it sounds pretty compelling. What's often overlooked, though, is this fact. Taxpayers are represented by local politicians. I greatly respect all the folks out here, and I'm looking at many of my friends who are elected officials. And anyone who runs for office, holds office, again, I have great respect for them. But politicians should not be deciding what I'm going to read. Librarians do a fine job of curating the collections that they have. They've done that for many years. I have faith in them. do we instead want to entrust that job and those decisions to someone who is gauging how the popular winds are blowing at a particular time? I don't think so. And when deciding what I can read or can't read, quite frankly, the last person I want making that call is a politician who has an upcoming election. Let's pass these bills.
Who wants to follow that? That was awesome. Our next invited speaker is Representative Jennifer Stewart, District 59. She represents Pawtucket, and she's going to be talking about the companion bill in the House for freedom to read.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those wonderful remarks, Senator McKinney. I feel like there's really not much more for me to say, so that's a real pleasure, but it's so heartening to see so many of my colleagues in the House and the Senate, all of you who love, support, and use libraries here to support the bills that are being heard this session to promote and protect the role of libraries in our society. I'm not going to talk too much about the Freedom to Read bill. You've heard the major points of it. It's really a statement, an affirmation of democratic values that I believe most of us hold dear in Rhode Island. But before getting into that, there's really three themes I want to highlight. One is love, the second is trust, and the third is what I've already mentioned, democracy. This Freedom to Read bill really comes out of love, my love of reading, my love of books, and my love of libraries, and really a concern about the ways that libraries have been pilloried and attacked and really put under threat. I'm a teacher, I'm a history teacher in my other job, not in the State House. And as has been alluded to already by Senator McKinney, so much of what may have seemed not controversial and not up for debate has become controversial and apparently up for debate. The Freedom to Read Act is basically staking out a clear position in that debate when it comes to libraries. And that brings me to the next theme of trust. This bill is about trusting librarians to do their jobs according to their professional standards. It's about trusting libraries in their function and mission to serve our communities. It's also about trusting readers and the patrons of libraries to be able to make the choices that they deem to fit and suit themselves and their families. And one thing I was thinking a lot about and preparing for today was a comment that was made during the hearing on this bill at the end of February. One of the people who spoke in support of the bill said that in all of his life, and he was an elderly gentleman, he had never been hurt by a book. And he had never been hurt by an idea that he might have read about in a book. And instead, the library and its variety of offerings actually helped him through some of the most difficult times in his life, and helped him figure out who he was and what was important to him. And people can't do that if they're only exposed to what seems to be what they agree with on the face of it. We need different ideas. We need to engage the whole range of what's out there. And we need to trust that all of that messiness that might be part of that is okay and is essential for a democracy to function. And so in closing, I just want to say that I'm so proud to be the prime sponsor of this bill. And I, like everyone who is involved with these bills, believe strongly this is the right time to move forward with all of them and pass them this session. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rep. Stewart, for such a poignant way to think about reading and just bringing out the personal nature of it. Is Rep. Morales here? It's on his way? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Our next invited speaker is Cheryl Space. She's director of the Community Libraries of Providence, and she's also co-chair of RILA's Legislative Action Committee. Take it away, Cheryl.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with our representatives, our senators, and all of these amazing supporters of the Freedom to Read. So, good afternoon. The Freedom to Read Act and the Librarian and Educator Protections language in the state's obscenity laws add critical language to state legislation to encourage and protect the freedom of public libraries to acquire and deaccession materials without limitations, and to be protected against attempts to ban, censor, or otherwise restrict access to books and other materials. They also allow librarians and educators to feel confident in selecting a diverse array of materials for children and youth, knowing that if they are following their board-approved collection development policy and their professional training, that they will have an affirmative defense. These bills are exceptionally important right now, as Representative Stewart shared, because there is an unfortunate narrative that is being developed and repeated about libraries, specifically the Children's Department, in regards to librarians indoctrinating young children to a woke agenda or grooming them to live their lives in a manner that might be objectionable to their parents, that the library is not a safe place. However, when we hear this narrative, my colleagues and I wonder if any of these concerned folks have visited a children's room recently. When you walk into a children's room, this is what you will see. You'll see Legos, crayons, glue sticks, construction paper, colorful picture books, tutors helping kids with their homework, your neighbors, and friendly librarians who smile and welcome you warmly, and who, by the way, can privately and respectfully help guide parents and children to just the right books, being respectful of their values and their family concerns. However, just because a book does not align with a particular parent's political views, religious views, or family values does not mean that it is obscene or pornographic, and that it does not belong in the library. Public libraries hold a unique position in our often polarized society. Any person, regardless of their political views, their socioeconomic status, their religious background, their gender identity, their sexual identity, their age, or their race, can fully participate for free in the programs and services and resources of their public library. Librarians have a professional responsibility to provide a diversity of materials in our collection that reflect all of the people in our American society. And I will tell you one thing is that we can all agree on: books are powerful. They're powerful because they fuel a sense of belonging and empathy. Let me tell you a story about the power of a shared story that I just witnessed on my way here. I was just at the Knight Memorial Library for a reception for Javier Zamora, who is the author of this year's Reading Across Rhode Island selection. He wrote Solito about his journey to the United States with a guide at age 9 to join his parents. His father had left El Salvador when he was 1 and his mother when he was 5. And now he was 9 and traveling on his own. So the children's room of the library was filled with 40 teenagers, and all of them were Spanish and English speakers, many of them from El Salvador, some from Guatemala, some from other Central American countries. So we came to the end of the talk, and Javier was signing books. And I was noticing this very engaged back and forth between one of the young men. And the teacher leaned over to me and she said, "This is the first book he ever read." And he read it in English and Spanish. And now he feels empowered to write and tell his own story. And he advocated for us to be here today. And she said they didn't believe they were actually going to meet him until he walked in the room, because so many dreams have gone unfulfilled for these children. So this is why books matter. And this is why we have to have these diverse stories. As people have said, many of the challenges nationwide are against people of color or members of the LGBTQIA community. And library staff nationally, amidst relentless pressure, and in some cases genuine harassment and accusations from outside groups, resolutely resist the pressure to narrow the scope of critical information and representation in our collections. Groups attempting to censor benefit from whipping up a frenzy. It's our job to apply the brakes and to make room for a thoughtful exchange between informational professionals in our library and concerned members of the public, to reduce the tension and the drama of unexamined statements. Many people submit a list of 100 books, as Senator McKinney said, and have not read one of them. They've just been told these are bad. We must stand strong. We must educate people about the inherent value of the free exchange of ideas for our democracy and the role of the public library as a trusted public institution where this freedom is exercised each and every day. Please pass these bills and let all Rhode Islanders know that they are valued by affirming their history, their point of view, and their stories, and that they will be protected in our library collections. Thank you. Thank you.
Cheryl, I think you got some people fired up. Our next speaker is Reverend Darren Collins, representing the Rhode Island State Council of Churches, and Reverend Collins will be speaking on the importance of intellectual freedom. Is Reverend Collins here? Oh, great.
I'm going to fight every instinct of my Baptist tradition and keep my remarks brief. In 1612, English dissenter and early Baptist Thomas Helwys wrote what is considered by many to be the first document in the English language calling for complete freedom of conscience. a freedom that Helwys uniquely and radically envisioned for all people, not just Protestant Christians. A copy was delivered to the King, King James I, and in response, King James I threw Helwys into Newgate Prison, where he died 4 years later. In 1644, Roger Williams published The Bloody Tenet of Persecution in reaction to the theocratic leanings of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and specifically Reverend John Cotton. Williams again highlighted the importance of freedom of conscience, or, as Roger Williams liked to call it, soul liberty. This book was burned in England upon publication. 20 years later, thereabouts, King Charles II gave Williams a charter that holds a unique place in history. Calling it a lively experiment, he consented to the establishment of a colonial government that recognized the rights of individuals to exercise their conscience free from the coercion of any authority, religious or secular. A healthy society requires wholesome relationships, including a connection with peoples whose lives and beliefs may be different from our own. To establish healthy relationships, we must have encounters with others. Discovering and learning about others through books and movies and music is an important start. To this end, our libraries and librarians should not be threatened or coerced into hiding away the books or other media that are vitally important sources for engaging with one another and creating healthy relationships. The legislation we are supporting today stands in line with the work of Helwys and Williams and many others in protecting all Rhode Island citizens from the ideologies of superiority and exclusion held by a few that are all too often wrapped in language of faith. As a Christian and a Baptist preacher in the tradition of Helwys and Williams, I value protections for freedom of conscience. I also value Jesus' mandate to establish wholesome relationships, especially with those who are marginalized, ignored, or rejected in wider society. On behalf of the Rhode Island State Council of Churches, I'm pleased to speak in support of these library protection bills. This legislation not only protects the freedom of conscience of every citizen in the state of Rhode Island, it also works to ensure the freedom of religion of people of all faiths, or no faith at all, who consider it to be sacred and an ethical way of life to seek the common good and work for an inclusive and therefore wholesome community. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Collins. Our next speaker is Dr. Margaret Paccioni-Dyslewski, a psychologist and clinical assistant professor at the Warren Alpert Medical School at Brown University. And Dr. Paccioni-Dyslewski will be speaking on the impact of access to books on children's social emotional learning.
Thank you, folks, for the opportunity to come by and join you today. So I have a story to tell you. Years ago, it's a book, so I should start off many, many years ago. I was working on my doctoral dissertation, and I was trying to live life. And what I would do is I would go to the library, and I would take my daughter, who at the time was in middle school. And now, if you go back many years, there were open stacks. So we worked out a deal where I would sit at the table and I would give Nicole the references, and she would run around and she would take the periodicals off the shelf and she would bring them to me. She was damn good at it. I mean, it was amazing, much better than I would ever be. So one day we were down at the library at Fordham University, and Nicole came to me at the table. She had a book, and I can tell by her face that she was a little bit upset. She had a book, and she said, Mom, look at this. And she showed me a picture of a lynching that had taken place in the late 1800s in one of the southern states. Now, would that have been the first book I would have selected for a 12-year-old? Well, probably not. But you know what? We had a wonderful age-specific conversation about the picture. And it was a real social emotional learning moment. It was great. It was really great. Social and emotional learning is an integral part of education and human development. According to educators and behavioral health specialists, there are 5 core competencies of social emotional learning: self-management, relationship building, responsible decision-making, self-awareness, and social awareness. Constructive conversation about complicated topics is the foundation of healthy social and emotional learning. And the books are the places where we can find those conversations. Books are a healthy supply of complex and often thorny subjects that help develop empathy, increase understanding of social issues, and enhance sound decision-making. You can't make decisions about things that you don't know about, and books serve up those subjects. Now, I found an interesting survey, and in this survey, they asked 2 different groups of kids. One that had access and conversation around inclusive topics, and the other kids that did not. And the kids that were engaged on some regular basis around inclusive topics did better in school, had better attendance in school, and I like this one, reported feeling safer and more belonging at school, right? A really, really big deal. So let's create an environment in which professionals who choose these books for us and for our children feel safe, right? That's the goal. By the way, Nicole survived childhood. She is an organizer of today's event. She's sitting in the back. And listen to this. She teaches a course at the law school called Law and the Race, or Race and the Law. You're like, you can't make this stuff up, right? Thank you. I rest my case.
Our final speaker this afternoon is Representative David Morales from District 7 and Providence, and he will be introducing House Bill H7575. And, oops, I lost my notes here. Welcome, Representative Morales.
Thank you so much, Bernice. Most importantly, thank you again to all of our librarians who day in and day out do so much to support our neighbors. They do so much to support our community. Regardless of one's socioeconomic background, regardless of one's zip code, regardless of your age, our public libraries serve everyone within our communities. And for that reason, I've been incredibly proud to see that over the years, the state is starting to further recognize the importance that our libraries play when it comes to our neighbors. Because over the last 2 fiscal years, we have finally ensured that we are fully funding our state libraries and that they are receiving the full reimbursement from the state that they deserve. And that is because during the height of the pandemic, we recognized that libraries were essential. Because our librarians did not stop engaging with our communities. They adapted. They ensured that all of our youth, all of our adults, all of our seniors had access to resources. And even as we resumed back to in-person services, the momentum did not stop. Services have continued to increase. The reach for philanthropic support has continued. The engagement with our federal delegation to ensure that more federal dollars are coming back to our local libraries continues. And it is showing. It is showing in increased literacy rates. It is showing within our youth who have access to the libraries after school. Because some of our communities don't necessarily have access to recreation centers or extracurricular activities within their public schools. And that is where our libraries fill in that gap. Therefore, it is vital that this fiscal year, we remain committed to supporting our libraries. And for that reason, we will continue to advocate to ensure that for the third consecutive year, our libraries are fully funded as they deserve to be. And at the same time, we are going to be here to ensure that our librarians feel supported in the workplace. Because as we have seen nationally, there have been increasing trends related to efforts to ban books, or in the cases of trying to intimidate our librarians, trying to intimidate our public servants who are just trying to serve our community. And that is why we're going to have a firm stance of ensuring that we establish affirmative defense protections, the same protections that exist in 44 other states. And we're also going to ensure that we codify into legislation what it means to ensure that our communities feel protected. They feel protected when it comes to diverse forms of programming, when it comes to promoting our LGBTQ plus community. And we recognize that similar to our libraries, we cannot do this alone because it takes a village. And for that reason, we are gathered here today at the State House, as we have done each and every single year when it comes to National Library Week. But it's not enough to just simply say in rhetoric that we support our libraries and our librarians. We are here at the State House to ensure that when it comes to public funds, when it comes to investments, and when it comes to public statutes and laws, we are demonstrating that. So thank you all again so much for being here, because your presence makes a difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to all of our speakers. This is great. We did set aside time for questions for our speakers. If anyone had any questions, I'll try to field them. You were all just blown away. I was. I know I was. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to our press conference and Library Advocacy Day. There are some materials in the back of the room that have more information about what you heard about today. Please contact your representatives and your senators. We're still fighting the fight for all of the bills that were discussed today. So thank you so much.